Joe Vitale and I, we talk about like we're not going to do new things for the sake of newness. So it looks new. Oh, it's a new day. No. The warm up and the stick handling and all these things that we're doing, the foundational elements, whether it's a backhand or a toe drag or whatever it is, it's going to be the same every day because it takes that repetitiveness, that consistently doing it to get better.
That was 915 game NHL veteran and Stanley Cup champion, Jamal Mayers. And you are listening to the Up My Hockey Podcast with Jason Podolin. Just watch me now. Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolin, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolin, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hello there, and welcome back to the Up My Hockey Podcast with Jason Podolin. I am your host, Jason Podolin, and we are here for episode 143 in the series, and Jamal Mayers is joining us today. Jamal Mayers is somebody that is, actually I'm looking at his bio here now. He's actually 2 years older than me, so he's born in 74, but we did cross paths in the minors and in the NHL. I get right into it here in the interview. We actually fought in the NHL. It was the last game of the season in 1999, I believe, St. Louis versus Los Angeles. And I started with that. It wasn't a plan. It just sort of came to mind, and Jamal remembered it. So we revisit that. But we definitely did play against each other when he was with Worcester as well, and I was with the St. John Maple Leafs. So a little bit of a history there, and Jamal was nice enough to come on the program today and discuss some of his time in the NHL. His journey into it, but mostly we talk about actually youth hockey. Surprisingly enough, I don't ever have a game plan laid out for how the interview is going to go, but Jamal has a son, a 2012 born son, that he is head coaching right now. It's a good team. I guess he said it's the 15th ranked team in the U.S. He's got a couple assistant coaches with him that are also ex-NHLers with sons on the team, and they're having a ton of fun doing it. So that's where the conversation shifted to quite quickly. And then we also conclude with the new development of the NCAA accepting Canadian Hockey League players into the scheme, into the fold there, now able to accept scholarships after playing major junior hockey. So we discussed the potential impact that may have. And all in all, it was a good conversation. It was a short conversation, considering where my podcasts usually end and or start and end. And it was about a 40-minute conversation today because Jamal had other arrangements. So we kept it short and sweet. We definitely could have talked longer, that is for sure. But today is a little bit of an abbreviated interview from what you're used to if you're a longtime listener. So yeah, well, let's get right into it. It was awesome talking with Jamal. I mean, for those of you who don't know Jamal, I guess I should give you his hockey DB a little bit. He came out of Thornhill. He's from Toronto originally. Came out of Thornhill, the Met JHL, and he says in the interview that he always wanted to play OHL, but he wasn't good enough at the time when he had to make the decision. But he was able to get a scholarship to Western Michigan University, where he played 4 years and got drafted there his first year playing at Western Michigan. He went on to play with the Worcesters, split time with the Blues until he became a full-time St. Louis Blue in 99-2000. And then from there, essentially the rest was history. He played for the Blues for looks like 7 or 8 seasons, ended or had a stop in Toronto with the Maple Leafs, which we never talked about at all, but playing for his hometown I'm sure was special. Went from there to Calgary to the San Jose Sharks and ended with Chicago, where he was able to hoist a cup in 2013, I believe. So, a lot of his career we actually didn't touch on. But at the end of the day, Jamal played 915 games in the NHL. Scored 90 goals, 219 points, and 1,200 penalty minutes, and also 63 playoff games. So a super, super successful career. He also represented Canada at the World Championships in 2000. So lots for him to be proud of with his career. Now he's trying to pass that on to the next generation there in the St. Louis area. So without further ado, I bring you Jamal Mayers. All right, here we are for episode 143 with an old adversary of mine, longtime NHLer, Mr. Jamal Mayers. Thanks for being on the program, sir.
Great to be here. It's good to see you again. I love the beard.
Well, hey, what do you do? Hey, I started growing it out, and I'm like, what the hell happened to my dark beard?
I hear you.
I think
I shaved mine, so you can't see the gray.
Yeah, I know. My hair itself isn't nearly as bad as my beard. Like I don't let the hair grow very often. But yeah, this is very different than 10 years ago. You know, Facebook will flash up memories or whatever, and I'm like, that was 10 years ago. It looked really dark and black, and I guess 3 kids, and you know all the things that happen. It happens, but
that's right.
Just gotta own it, man. Just gotta own it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome to have you on. I was actually chuckling because I was looking at your DB, and which didn't exist, right? Like back when we played, which is so crazy because we had no idea where guys were coming from, where they played, you know, like what their resume was like, and I had to chuckle because when you got your instigator for jumping me in LA, do you remember that?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay, classic. Because some guys don't remember. I kind of a bad memory about that stuff too. But I didn't have many fights, and you had more than I did, so I didn't know if you'd remember. But I was looking at that, and we were both kind of in the same point of our careers of like trying to be NHLers at that point. Like you weren't necessarily cemented. I don't know if that's a good place to start or not, but I brought it up. I was thinking about that game, and I'll give you my backstory, just so you know where I was at. So I had just got traded from Toronto to LA. Perot went back the other way. They started me off in Long Beach, had some time in the NHL up to then, like with Toronto and with Florida, and this was going to be my 3rd team, and they'd called me up. So for the last 6 games of the season, and LA was out of the playoffs. You guys weren't, by the sounds of it, but it was like a mean nothing game. Like you guys couldn't move at all in the standings, and we were done. And it was one of those flat, nothing happening games, essentially, right at the end of the year. And I shouldn't have been actually handling it that way, apparently. Like, I didn't think that I was, but apparently, like, according to Larry Robinson, he was not happy. He, like, was up one side of me and down the other because I wasn't trying hard enough, apparently, in that last game 82 of the season. So, of course, at the start of the 3rd period, I'm like, well, okay, F this, let's go, right? So I start hitting. Nobody's hitting in the game at all, right? So I'm in the corner. I hit you, do whatever. You turn around and, like, grab me from behind, and we get in this fight. What is your recollection? Like, were you kind of in the same mode as me? Like, were you trying to make a statement yourself, or were you just pissed off that I hit you? Or do you remember anything about that at all?
Honestly, I don't remember why it happened, but I can assume that I wasn't happy with no one hitting the entire game, that you decided that that's when you're going to start to hit. So I probably was like, this is not happening. We're going to fight.
Right. Which is exactly what I knew would happen. That was the funniest thing. It's like, you want me to be the only one out here, like, running around. And I guess I should have had that mindset. I mean, really doing what I do now, like, I should have been worried about me making the right impression and, like, not looking like I was a tenured veteran when I wasn't. But I was also, like, I think pretty akin to the social aspect of that, you know, like, and maybe I couldn't, like, I wasn't comfortable enough stepping out of that void. And then Larry Robinson obviously pushed me out of that void, and it turns out, you know, that we both get 5 minutes and I'm in the box. But kind of an interesting spot, hey? Like, maybe that is a good spot, like making yourself relevant in the NHL or at whatever level, like the steps required to do that. What was your mindset like when you were stepping in, trying to make a name for yourself?
That's a great point. I think for me, it was always about affecting the game somehow. And, you know, especially early on, that for me was being physical, using my speed and getting in on the forecheck and being a disruptor. I played college hockey, so I didn't know how to fight. I never fought in junior. I didn't play junior. So my first fights were in the minors. My first fights were in the NHL. And so the good thing is I was strong enough to, like, protect myself. And usually through the first few years, I could like protect myself enough that if I wanted to punch, I could punch. And if I didn't feel comfortable because the guy was definitely a better fighter than me, I could at least survive enough to make it look good. But I think mindset wise for me was always a survival mindset. Like, how do I stay here? Especially because I spent 2 years in the minors in Worcester. And I like people of Worcester have been nice, were nice, but people would ask me from home, like, how are things? And I would say, they've never been Worcester. Like, I do not want to live here. Like, this can't be, I might as well go to grad school.
Never been Worcester. That's awesome.
So that's what I would say. Because I had told myself, if I don't make the NHL after this 3-year entry-level deal, then I'm going back to school. It just wasn't for me to, I don't know how to explain it. I wanted to play in the NHL, and if it wasn't the NHL, then I didn't want to do it. And it wasn't, so I had this like fear, even when I made it, that like it was going to be taken away. And I remember every training camp, literally every year until my last year pro, I still had that feeling where, you know how it is. Every training camp they say, "Oh, these 2 young kids, they're really good. They're gonna vie for a spot." And I'm thinking, they're not taking my spot. No, not this year. It's next year. They can do it next year, or somewhere else. It's not gonna be here. So, and I remember like talking to like Ryan Johnson, who's now assistant GM for Vancouver, and we would laugh because there's all these guys, like, you know how it is, the first week before training camp, there's no hitting. There's just guys out there flying, and they're all like, "Oh, did you see that guy from Switzerland? He's unbelievable." I'm like, I can't wait to run him over. Like he's not going to be that good once we hit him. Like, and it was a different time then. So it was there was the fear factor was a lot more prevalent, certainly than it is now. And so that to me was a skill that you honed in on, that you could like use, not that you weren't nice to people on the ice or like off the ice, but like you wanted to keep that uncertainty. For me, was keep people uncertain at training camp, uncertain within games. I didn't really talk to guys during games, in games. And even when I knew someone kind of, I didn't want to talk to them, and they would be like, "What the heck, man? We worked out together all summer and you're not even going to say hi to me?" Like, I liked the fact that they were wondering, like, what a jerk. Like, why would it? And then after the game, I text them, "Hey, sorry, I just don't talk during the games. Like, I'll talk to you after." And so, but that was an edge, right? Because then maybe they spend 3 shifts wondering, like, what's wrong with this guy? Like,
it's a competitive advantage. And I think I've talked about it on here before. How do you feel like, because you said it has changed, like those that can bring that aspect to the game now, it has to mean even more, I would think.
It does. And I remember I was leaving the game. My last year was 2013. And I remember talking to Keith Tkachuk about Matthew coming into the league. And I remember telling him, I said, "Walt, I know you retired, like maybe it was 4 years ago." I go, there is nobody tough anymore playing. Like, there's there's 6 guys in the league that are super tough that could certainly beat me up. But there's not how it used to be when you and I were playing, where every lineup had 3 or 4 guys willing to. Like, now I think you look at the lineup and they maybe have one, or they don't have anybody that's willing to. And I said, if Matthew's just even willing to, and willing to me is fight 3 times a year. If you're willing to, you are going to create space, because 98% of the players do not want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you. It has become even more of an advantage, if you will, to use that element to like create space for yourself and for your teammates and your line mates. And like the new tough player is a different player. Like it's Matthew. It's even what's his name, number 9 on the same team for Florida, who doesn't fight very often either. But like, that's what toughness is now. And so if you can just build in a little, forget toughness, because I think sometimes it gets misconstrued, because I know the game has changed. But if you could change the wording and say, if you have a little bit of unpredictability within your game, and uncertainty, And I always marveled at a guy like Chris Pronger was my roommate for 4 or 5 years. Nice guy in the room, just an absolute terror in front of the net, not a nice person. He would viciously use his stick against someone at least twice a year. And I remember talking to him saying, what are you doing there? Why would you do that? He goes, oh, I'm going to do that every year, twice a year, so that they're guys that I'm playing against, when I say I might carve your eye out or cross-check you in the face, well, he has done it twice a year, every year. And he's like, it's worth it for me to take a suspension, even if I have to take a suspension to keep people away from me. I'm not a big guy. I'm just kind of slight. And I was like, that's brilliant. It's genius. And it's a different game today, but I think that I believe that the rules regress in the playoffs 5 years. The game is still what it was 5 years ago in the playoffs. So the element of physicality, the element of intimidation, the fact that you're playing a team over the course of the best of 7, it becomes how do I get even the tiniest of edge? And that physical mental edge sometimes is the difference.
Yeah, no, I love you. Everything you're saying there is so on point. Like that element of unpredictability, of actual like safety, like you're, there's, we talk about fear, and especially with what I do now with like the mindset of that, and how to handle it in different capacities. And it's not the same as it once was, but there is still fear involved in the game from, am I going to get hit? Where am I vulnerable? If I go to the front of the net, what happens? If I say this, what happens? And some of that has been taken away with the rules and the way the game is, but there still is an element of it. When you were talking, like back when we played, there was the constant threat of pain and hurt, and there was a lot of guys in the team that would do that. And that is one of the things for me personally, being a goal scorer in that era, that I'm really proud of, is that, I would drop my gloves time and again too, but that wasn't really part of who I was. It was part of the era. But the ability to get to the places to score goals and knowing that you were going to get hurt in the process of doing it, like that's a mind screw, to have to go and do that. And for me, that's where I don't like that the game has regressed, because it's too easy to score, I think, now. There's less bravery involved in it. There's less courage involved in it. It's just like a high skill, yes, and there's tons of respect for the skill level and how to do that in this context. But the mindset side of it, I think, isn't quite what it was. And I don't know, like that's just me and kind of my viewpoint. But I do love watching playoff hockey now, because I think that comes back. I do think it comes back. You have to pay more of a price in different areas to get the job done. And that's why some guys are successful there and some guys aren't now.
It's in it. I don't think that's ever going to change. And those players that there's going to be some of them happen to be on the Leafs, if you're a Leafs fan, that either they're going to figure that out and be willing to do it, or they're going to spend their entire career not having success in the playoffs. And that's the truth, because even though you could have referees on here and say, no, we referee the same way in the playoff. No, you don't. You don't. The intensity ratchets up, and you can't, or else the game wouldn't have a flow to it. Yeah. So you have to let some of it go. And I like the game where it is. I think it becomes even the ferocity of it. I think I like more in the playoffs. It becomes more exciting. It's funny you talk about that nervousness and that factor. It was certainly there, and not to keep this digressing about when we played, blah, blah, blah. But there was a price to pay. Just getting to the front of the net was either a slash, a slight accidentally on purpose punch to the face, a cross check on the ribs, or like on your arm where they know you're vulnerable. Yeah. It was something on the way to the net you were getting. So you knew that if I'm going to the net, McSorley's going to punch me in the face for no reason. The ref's just going to say, well, you decided to go there. Like, that's what they would say.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, what are you talking
about? The connection to how the game is now, and I do think, we're joking about being dinosaurs and talking about back when we played, but I think that the relevance of understanding the game then does help today's player, at least for me, from a coaching aspect, because when I'm talking with some junior kid who is a high skill player, who is more of a perimeter guy, and I'm saying, hey, when you're driving the net, if you get to the far post every time, you're going to score many more goals and it's a brave place to go, and there's less consequences for you doing it now. So like, like we have the experiential factor of being like, yeah, that was hard, and like I was able to do it, and I would take X, Y, and Z in order to make that happen. Now, if you can get these guys to understand the value of getting there, it's a value to them. You know what I mean? And it's not as hard of a place to go anymore. But there still is an uncomfortability about it because their experience with the game is just their experience with the game, right? Like they haven't experienced like how it was before. So, anyways, there's still ways to score goals and still areas to score goals, right? That will never change. It's just who's willing to go there. And I think if we can get some guys to do that, it's kind of fun. I know I'm working with my 12-year-old on that now, right now. He likes to get wide, but then he constantly will try and go short side and usually ends up behind the net. I'm like, put the leg out, get to the far post, and you have way more options, right?
Absolutely.
But anyways, yeah, what a wild ride to see the game now, from our vantage point of being a player, and now the next generation coming under us and helping them and using our experiences, hopefully in a positive way for these young guys coming up. Just going to take a short break from the conversation with Jamal Mayers to give a shout out to my partners at Elite Prospects, the gateway to hockey. Online since 1999, eliteprospects.com is the #1 statistical hockey resource, serving over 1 million unique visitors weekly. It offers the most informative hockey player database on the web and has the most reliable transaction tracker available. For youth hockey players, EP is your very own online showcase to highlight your achievements and help secure future playing opportunities. Coaches, scouts, and schools at every level of the game consider Elite Prospects their one-stop shop to discover future stars. Hockey fan crazy about the NHL, the draft, and your team's top prospects? There's no better resource than EP Rinkside, providing insight and analysis on players worldwide through written features, video breakdowns, interviews, and more. Head to eliteprospects.com now and experience your gateway to hockey. The Elite Prospects is a partner with the UMH 68 as well. That's how we came into this partnership, and the UMH 68 is rocking and rolling for 2025. So if you are in Western Canada and you have an athlete either 2011 or 2012 age, Western Canada meaning Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, or British Columbia, check out upmyhockey.com to see what is coming to your province. We will be in Brandon. We will be in Martinsville. We will be in Edmonton. And we will be back again in Vernon for another year with different age groups. This is a best-on-best competition. It is a tournament unlike any other. There's a very large development focus with workshops for players and parents throughout. Player banquet. There's All-Star Awards and MVP Game Awards, and there is color commentators and NHL coaches and all kinds of good stuff to be had at the UMH 68, and something you want to be a part of. So check out upmyhockey.com. You can put in what I call a player watch list request. We do have scouts in every province looking at the age group in question. We also use a network, meaning coaches and managers can refer players, and parents can request that their players get watched. And we can take a look of whether you are worthy of an invitation or not to the UMH 68. So check it out, UMH 68, Western Canada in 2025 in June, coming to a city near you. Are you one of the top 68? Let us know your name at upmyhockey.com. Jamal, tell about who you have in the stable here, following in your footsteps.
Yeah, my girls are both soccer players. I have a freshman at Kansas State playing soccer. She's a midfielder. She started the 9 games as a freshman, which was kind of cool. My younger daughter is a junior in high school. She just committed to go to the same school, so she's going to Kansas State in a couple of years in 2026. So it'll be nice. They'll be together for a couple of years anyway. And then my son is the youngest. He's a 2012, just turned 12 last Saturday. And so
happy birthday.
That's it. Yeah. Coaching him for the last few years has been a ton of fun. Similarly to you, like it's nice to have. For us, we started AAA last year. So last year became really enjoyable because now you're having like-minded kids all together.
Right.
And that changes the dynamic of what you're able to do and how you're able to motivate and what you're able to show them and get them to understand the game. And now we're at a point where our philosophy with our group is to reward the intention. We want them making plays. We want them trying to do things. We want them, having fun being on the offensive side of things. But we have an expectation and a standard that they've set, and we set the standard for them at the beginning of the year, and then we're basically just stewards and reminding them of the standard that they created. And so what I try to do, we try to do, and I'm lucky I've got Matt Lashoff and Joe Vitale, who both played in the NHL, and their sons are on the team as well, is that we all have different strengths as coaches, and perhaps I'm more the disciplinarian one of sometimes, but I think that we play each other's roles nicely.
Right.
Is that, I try to keep them accountable to the standard that they created for themselves. And so, that creates that compete level, and that creates that the non-negotiables that we've created, whether it's, tracking, or whether it's, making sure we have a third guy high. Like, these are non-negotiable elements that have been embedded into our game. We play a swarm. I probably shouldn't tell you that, so that if we play you guys, you can figure it out and use it against us. But we're doing things, and we're starting to add in layers of our game where we're creating movement and overlapping and things like that in the offensive zone, and really trying to follow the trend of where we see the game going, not only where it is now, but where we see it going, so that they have that skill set. Now, because of that, we may not technically, I think we're 15th in the country. We may lose some games because we're going to turn pucks over because we're overlapping when they shouldn't have. And you got to live with some of those mistakes. But I would prefer that they learn how to play with the puck and value the puck and possess the puck. My feeling is at 15, 16, we can teach them, they still have to understand the time, score situation, where to put the puck and the value. Sometimes you just got to get it in, but at the end of shifts. But we also want them making plays. So we live with some mistakes that we probably won't have to live with when they're 15. But I think it's important. And I think that the challenge, I'm sure you feel as well, is halfway through the year, we all do this as coaches. We're like, oh my goodness, what is wrong with him? There's usually two or three kids. You're just like, oh, well, you know what? I always remind myself, well, we picked them. Yeah. We got to coach them. We got to get them there. Somehow we got to get them there. And we can't just say it's not happening. We got to push them aside. No. We got to find a way. We got to figure out a way between us coaches to find a way to get the best out of them, make them understand what we're trying to accomplish, try to get them to a confidence place, which is so difficult, right? Because sometimes they internalize it as, well, he's just getting mad at me. Well, some of it's effort. Most of it to me is effort. It's not the execution part. The execution part's going to come and go. But I don't know about you, but for me, it's the effort in situations that we have to keep them accountable toward. And so that's the challenge. Making sure they know we care, right? Making sure they know we care, but also being stern to know that perhaps they get it a little easy at home nowadays. So I tell our kids all the time, I said, I'm not going to lie to you. I said, your grandma's picking you up. You know what she's going to say? Great game, Jimmy. You did awesome. And I said, I had this funny speech where I said, she's lying to you. She's lying. If grandma tells you great game, she's lying. That was not a great game. And so one of the kids went home, and the mom didn't go to the game. And the mom said, well, I heard you had a really good game. Grandma said you had a great. See, coach said you would say I played a great game. We were terrible. You're lying to me. And the parents actually told me that story, so I started laughing. I'm like, yeah, I did tell them that. I did tell them you'd say that.
Yeah, coach dynamics, right? The honesty. I think that is, I mean, not that I want to dwell on that, but one of the things that I think my players like to hear from me, and that's whether I'm coaching a compete team or whether I'm working with somebody on mindset, is like the truth. At least my version of the truth, right? I think that so few people hear the truth, right? Even like that exercise of hearing the truth and then recognizing what you can do with that information, one way or the other, is like a skill set, in my opinion, right? Because how many times have you walked into a coach's office and asked for something or demanded something or asked a question, and maybe you heard a response that you didn't want to hear at the pro level? Now, what are you going to do with that information? Right.
Right.
And I think if they can learn this stuff now, at 12 and be honest with the thing, there's the process of the self-awareness aspect, right? The reset, the reprogram. What did I learn from that? What can I do different next time to get a different result? If they're just going through it, especially the AAA level, I mean, that's for those listening, that's the context we're talking about here. We're talking about competitive kids who want to be better at the game. There needs to be some type of a process, self-assessment process for them to get better. If they're constantly told they're doing a good job, then you're not allowing them the opportunity.
That's a great point. And I think what I like about it, doing it this way, is that now you're putting the choice back on them. Now it's their choice. Are you choosing to take this information and get better and try it our way, which might be uncomfortable? And I think sometimes, and I'll say this to some people last year, not so much this year, but I'm not going to solve Johnny's problem by putting him with a different player. I need him to hunt sometimes. I like that he's smart and he likes to hover and he likes to find the quiet area, but sometimes he needs to hunt. It can't just be everybody else hunting and he's doing that. So I'm not going to fix it for him and change the line just because I know it'll let him just do what he likes to do.
Yeah.
I'm going to make him uncomfortable, because what happens if he's not scoring or he's not affecting the game positively because he's producing? How else is he going to affect the game? He's got to find another way to affect the game, or else I'm making him one-dimensional because I'm happy he scored 2 goals, but really I don't think he played well. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
So that's the challenge. Is like, I always tell, we have a really one of our players is a early 2013. He's born in January, technically 13. So he's a 13. And he's playing on our 2012s. And, sometimes I'll tell him, I say, do you want to be a goal scorer or do you want to be a hockey player? Because you're a goal scorer. There's no question. But to be a hockey player, you're going to have to change some things. You're going to have to try it a different way sometimes.
Right.
Because as I'm sure you're aware, like sometimes those guys will go through the game and the game will end and they'll be like, what happened? I didn't get anything. I'm like, well, you should have recognized that 8 minutes in and made the adjustment to get more on the hunt, and then it'll flow for you. So it's so much fun to show them this part, to teach them this part, to when they're accepting of it, and then the light will go on and be like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. I get it.
I love it.
That's fun.
Yeah, I mean, building there's so many dynamics to it. My two right now, my two out players, so my 09 and my 12, they're both more playmakers, right? So you're talking about hunting, so they want the puck and they're good at distributing it. But when they don't have the puck, they're so anxious to get into the mix, right? Because they want the puck that they forget that quiet ice, and they often take themselves out of that area to score. So it's funny, like right now in our own home, like that's what I'm working on with them, is like being above the puck, being above the play, let it happen, and then jump into a seam. So you can be the one that gets the shot, not always the one that's setting somebody up for it. But yeah, everyone has their tendencies, right? Which is great. And if you want to expand yourself, I mean, that is the way you have to see the game. You have to be able to see it from as many ways as possible. And it's great that you're giving your boys the opportunity there to see that. On the minor hockey kind of topic that we're on here, the father-son dynamic is one of the most I don't know what the right way to put it is, but there's been a lot of bad experiences. Let's just say that in my hockey community, like I've got my hockey Facebook group, and there's a lot of discussion about that, right? Like the what is that called when parents take care of their own kids? There's some word for it.
Nepotism.
Yeah. So the nepotism involved, right? That the dad's son has the C all the time and gets the most ice and might not be the best player and blah, 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 blah. When I started, I was so hyper aware of that I actually took the opposite direction. And I'll just tell you a quick story. It was like 2 months into the season, we were coming home from a game, and I almost choke up anytime I ever tell the story. But Hudson said to me, he's like, Dad, why don't you coach me like the way you coach everybody else? Like I wouldn't talk to him. like I was doing the opposite, because I was like so focused of not being that guy that I was involved and invest in everybody else, and I wouldn't even invest in my own kid. Right. So I took it too far the one way. And now I found the longer you do something, obviously the better you get at it. Now I think I found a really good balance of being able to coach my own kids along with everybody else's. But how have you taken that, and where is your awareness at with your, involvement with your own son, who obviously you care about, and and his involvement in the game?
Well, it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
I'm definitely harder on him in the way that I speak to him in games. I have less patience with him. So I think I have to work on how that communication happens. What I'd like to get to is a point where it's one of the other coaches that are communicating to him,
Yeah.
because I am very quick to get on him about certain things, or like reads, or if he's not being aggressive enough or hard enough, or doesn't come to the bench hard enough. It's like, or extends his shifts too long. So it's definitely a challenge. I think that I am harder on him. I think that his makeup is he can handle it. He'll come back at me at sometimes too.
Yeah.
But we're still figuring that out, because I don't think it's healthy to continue that. I also do check-ins with him, like, to know, like, that I care, that I want the best for him, but that only goes so far. I think that I have to get better at just letting it happen and letting the other coaches do it. What I see is, like, I think it's just, to be honest with you, it's probably more on me. I've got to get better at it in how I communicate with him in game.
Yeah.
He also needs to do a better job of receiving that feedback when it happens.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm the adult, so I think it all, like, 90% I'll take on me. And, like, so I've tried a new approach at times. I'm not great at it, but I have tried a new approach with him, where I'll say, I'm not going to yell at you. I'm going to sit you down. I'm going to talk to you calmly, but then you have to take the information and, like, use it. You can't just ignore me when I'm communicating the way you have chosen that you would like me to communicate with you. Right.
Yeah.
And so, but there's times where I do get on him about skating, because sometimes he gets watching. And the problem is, not problem, but the part that, as a coach, is sometimes you get the reaction you want. And you're like, yeah, it worked. So it's like, I'm going to have to do that again. So, when you need more out of them and you need a spark, you need something, it's hard, because when I have gotten on him, if I did that to my middle daughter, she would shut down. Yeah. It'd be done. My older one, I could get on hard, and she would respond well. When I get on him, he responds positively more times than not.
Yeah.
So it's I will say I'm not good at it. It's a work in progress. It's the reason why I probably, at 15, like, you're kind of like, where's the next coach for him? Like, when is that happening?
Yeah.
It's nice that we have different voices. Like, Phil McRae comes out on Wednesdays, basically helps run the whole practice. They get a different voice as a group. It's healthy for them to have a different voice. And all three of us coaches coach differently, right?
Yeah.
So that's a long-winded answer to tell you that I'm not very good at it.
Yeah.
And that it's a work in progress. But I think having those check-ins with him on the way home, I ask him, do you want to talk about the game? Do you want to talk about it? Sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no. Yeah. On the way to the game, I can't help myself. Sometimes I'm like, I'll text him 3 things, and that's all I get. I'll, like, say, move your feet. If a guy's even with you, by the time you get to you're on the entry, if a guy's even with you by the hash mark, cut back. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'll give him 3 pointers, and then I'll leave it alone.
Yeah. Going to take a short break from the conversation with Jamal to say thank you to everyone who has emailed or reached out through the website, who is interested in becoming either an ambassador or an affiliate of the Up My Hockey brand. I announced it on the last podcast, and many of you were listening, and that's fantastic. So, if there is anybody, this is something that is happening. It is for real. I am trying to grow the reach of Up My Hockey in a geographic sense, to have either ambassadors on the ground in hockey hotbeds who either want to promote the program themselves, be a part of the action, or have a background in coaching, are immersed in the network themselves, and want to grow their hockey acumen and become one of the Up My Hockey mindset coaches, working with me and under me through the Up My Hockey programming that is available. So 2 ways to be involved, either as an ambassador or as an affiliate slash associate. And that's a pretty exciting time in the growth of Up My Hockey. So if you are one of these coaches, somebody who wants to make the game a better place, someone who believes that mindset is a very important component of the development arc, and want to give back to the game, while hopefully being helping you in the compensation aspect of your growth and journey as a coach and training, then Up My Hockey may be a good avenue for you to pursue. So yeah, reach out to me at jason@upmyhockey.com or through the contact form on my website. I look forward to the conversation and seeing if we're a good fit. Now, let's get back to the conversation with Jamal Mayers. Good for you. The one thing I really like there that you said, and one, it is a challenge. I mean, and it's a dance, and it's hard enough, with a team full of 17 where you're trying to find all those entry points, right, and to be successful with them. And then you have the dad hat on, including the coach hat. It is much more dynamic than I think some people realize that haven't been in that environment. But the idea of like, how can I coach you best? I really encourage parents even to have that conversation with their kids. And you mean, yeah, we're talking 2012. So what's that like right now? We're talking 12-year-olds. Most 12-year-olds are able to have that conversation. Maybe some aren't, but like, don't discount what your kids are able to talk about either. And like asking them, how do you want to go over the game afterwards, if at all? Like getting them involved in that, how you want me to participate. And like, that is a really cool dynamic, because even when it comes to development, let's say, or like the practice away from practice, some parents, I get that a lot, is like, he never wants to do it, I'm constantly nagging. Well, as soon as you're nagging, it's over, it's done. Like, right? So it's like, how do you want me to support you in this? Like, you've said you want to be a AAA player, or you want to be this, or you want to be that, yet your actions aren't maybe aligning with what you're telling me. Like, do you want me to help you get in the garage and shoot some pucks? And if they say yes, that's a whole different conversation now, because now you're not nagging because they asked you to help. Right. You know what I mean? And so that whole perspective is massively different, but that initial conversation has to happen. So you mean, kind of a long-winded answer to your point, but like you asking him, hey, like, this is how I want to be coached. Essentially, I don't want to be yelled at. That's a pretty mature conversation, and then so you're coming at him in a mature way. And yes, you're going to have to turn the volume up every now and again, like when it needs to be, but at least you understand how he wants to be spoken to. I think that's pretty productive.
Yeah. I think that, at the end of the day, it's not worth our relationship, right? And so I don't want it to get to a point where it's affecting that. And so I think having those check-ins, even away from the game, just making sure everything's okay, or even smarter than that, having mom have the check-in with him to see where he's at, is also helpful information. I think that part allows them to like own the process and own the pace of what's happening. But I do have a point to make about what you were talking about, the off-ice skills and working on. It was way different for us, right? Like, we just grabbed our street lights. I live in the city, so we'd go work on our game. We'd be like, play street hockey, and there was a lot more organic. The way I suggest it for parents now, and I do skills and stuff too, is go out there and do it in the driveway or wherever you're doing it, in the basement or the garage, for 15 minutes, and then come back in, do something else. And if you tell them to do it for 30 or 45 minutes, it's not happening, in my experience. Yeah. But when I tell them to do it for 10, 15 minutes, go work on your pull it in, Bernard shot, pull it in and shoot it.
Yeah.
I'll come out and pass with you if you want. And then he'll go out and do it for 15 minutes. Or let's say they're kids, so they'll go a week and you're like, I haven't seen him outside shooting pucks in a while. And I'll just say to him, hey, I haven't seen you outside shooting pucks in a while. I think you forgot to do that. And he'll be like, Oh, yeah. And then it might not be that day, but the next day you'll go out and do it again.
Yeah.
But it's never for more than 50 minutes. Come in, do something else, get a popsicle, do something else, play a video game, watch TV, whatever they do on TikTok. I don't even know. Whatever they're doing with their phones. But my point is, I love getting kids to do it 10, 15 minutes twice a day on their own. Then they're more likely to do it every day.
Yeah.
And as you know, it's the compounding everydayness of it where they start to improve versus 30 minutes twice a week. They're not going to improve. It's too long. It feels like work for them. They're by themselves most of the time.
Yeah.
It's like there's no chance they're going to sustain that.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome because you're speaking exactly my language. I developed a program that's an online program that teams can take or individuals. It's kind of the backbone of what my mindset stuff is about. And week 2 is all about, I call it 10x development. So like ways to get better. So it's short form videos throughout the week, Monday to Friday. And I build up like what I call the peak potential process. And part of it at the end is like understanding the value of time, and also the understanding of like the deliberate practice when we're talking about time, and that we can't deliberately practice something for extended periods of time. And we can actually make the most of smaller time increments by, involving our head and like having a plan and, like really taking this almost like a professional approach to whatever this block is. And I call them 20-minute monsters in the program. So a little bit longer than you, with the 10 to 15, but 20 minutes, I say a 20-minute monster. Now, what are you going to do in that 20 minutes that you're going to dedicate mind, body, soul to get better, right? And talk about it from a strength and weakness perspective too, like that we have this plan. And you're 100% right, because that is where that's where the juice happens. Like when you not in the garage or outside shooting pucks aimlessly to get 100 pucks in because dad wants me to, right? Throwing them at the net, but like actually committing to some aspect of that shot for 20 minutes with deliberateness is going to do way more for you than just throwing 100 pucks blindly at the net. So I talked to them all about that process, right? And it's great because when people are armed with now new information, they can make new decisions, right? And they can be responsible for those decisions and their development. And it's not a big pull or this thing coming down from above from mom or dad to make them do it. They actually get invested in it because now they see the excitement in it, and it's not a huge piece of time. But I will say one thing to you that I add into the program: 20 minutes a day for a year is 3 8-hour work weeks. Think about that. That's what that is. Like, it's crazy when you think about the compounding of time if you want to play the long game. 20 minutes a day for 365 days adds up to 3 8-hour work weeks. It's bonkers to me. You're telling me you practice your shot for that long, you're not going to have an advantage over somebody else? And we're talking in that small little chunk that you said. Who doesn't have 20 minutes a day?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. No, I love the part about the intentional part, every aspect of that, but especially the intentionality of it. Working on something specific. I think that it's important to create a progression and an understanding, like the fundamental aspect of it, the repetitiveness of it. And I try, when we do things in the summer, Joe Vitale and we talk about, like, we're not going to do new things for the sake of newness. So it looks new. Oh, it's a new day. No. The warm up and the stick handling and all these things that we're doing, the foundational elements, whether it's a backhand or a toe drag or whatever it is, it's going to be the same every day because it takes that repetitiveness, that consistently doing it to get better. Yes. And I tell the kids that they have to, if they want to get better, they're going to have to sink into that monotony of that specific drill, that specific skill, doing it over and over and over and over again. That's why you see like Kobe doing a simple crossover step back shot, like the simplest thing that you would think, because that's the foundation for everything. So yeah. It's so important that they know that.
100%. I mean, that a big word for some people out there. I know it's for me, but it's myelination. Like, it's the art of learning, like, which is another thing that I actually touch on, like the 4 stages of learning and like getting those brain connections wired so it becomes awesome and automatic. Like, there's not an awkwardness in it. We can do other things. We can almost do it without thinking, right? Because it's so programmed in and we've dedicated the time to it, that we end up in this spot where it is automatic, right? And that's And that's totally foundation. And talk about the nuances and the layers you can get in that, right? Like of whatever that skill is. And coaches, my gosh, yeah, you're hitting a passion point for me of like, and half the parents don't know any better. Like every skill practice is this new thing with new apparatuses and you're not getting any better at all unless you have the foundation that you're building from that. It shouldn't be like a circus show out there and just trying to keep everything novel. And it doesn't mean it's better. It's actually I think that the guys, well, I mean, I'm biased because it is my approach, but like, I feel like I'm 20 years behind what I'm watching everyone else doing, because I'm doing basic edge work. I'm doing basic skills, when it comes to stick handling, adding progressions in and movement and reads. But like, if you don't have those pieces dialed, like, why are you going anywhere else? So anyways, I don't know. I kind of got off on a tangent on that, but it's
so true. I'm 100% on board.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
like an arms race right now with like, trying to, the more gadgets you can have on the ice, the better your practice is or something.
I'm like, can we get rid of these gadgets? Like, I'm trying to get less things on the ice. I'm so happy we're at the age now where we don't have to bring cones on the ice.
Yeah, no doubt. I had one more question, but we're on time. Should we cut it? Or I wanted to ask you about the NCAA since you were
Sure.
Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit more about played university super young, came out of there, actually got drafted from university. You weren't in competition at that point with any junior players that wanted to also maybe have a bite at that. The announcement last week with the NCAA now allowing CHL players to take scholarships, in some cases away from other players, I think.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think that does to the landscape of NCAA in particular, and maybe the junior A route might be even more interesting in general to that?
Yeah, honestly, I think it's going to squeeze in two areas, in my opinion. I think what happens is you're going to see the majority of players still come from the USHL, and the North American League is going to get squeezed. And I think that the BC League is going to get squeezed, because what's going to happen, in my opinion, is if let's say I went to Western Michigan, they're building a new rink in 2028, and we can now take junior players. I am hiring a dedicated scout for the OHL and the Western League, and perhaps even the Quebec League, to go scour undrafted players that are playing junior currently, that are wondering what the heck they're going to do, but are really good players. And I want to take them at 19 and offer them a full off. Basically, what you're offering them, in my opinion, is forget the scholarship, because they're not there for the scholarship. They're not even there for the education. You know what they're there for? They're there to extend their hockey lives. And that, to me, would be the catch that I would say is, I can buy you 4 more years of development to realize your dream. And oh, by the way, your parents are going to love this part. You're actually going to have a degree when you're done. And if you are done, you have a degree. So that would be my strategy. But I think you're right. So where does it get constricted? Well, I think they're going to start taking players from junior. Just makes sense. The USHL will be fine, because there's still a ton of really, really good players there. And a lot of Americans are not going to want to go to Canada to play junior. So they're going to just go to the USHL and then go to school. And then that's where I think it hurts the North American League, and that's where I think it hurts the BC League. Because you've seen it, right? Like, the reason why I was fortunate, I went to college at 18, well, 17, but as a true freshman. Well, because Quinnipiac won a national championship, now these other schools realize, hey, wait a second, I could take a 20-year-old freshman. So the trend now is there's very rare to take a freshman that's 18. You have to be there's maybe a handful of them now. I just fear that it's going to squeeze out kids in the North American League. It's going to squeeze out kids. It's going to buy kids in junior an extra life. But what it would also do is, you have a 2012. The idea of playing junior, to me, is now a possibility, because I can convince my wife, hey, if he's good enough to play junior at 16, 17, 18, he could still go to school after that if he ends up not being good enough. And so that's what I think ends up happening. There's a lot smarter people that know the interdynamics of what's happening, but my thinking is, if you take 4 kids off of each junior team I mean, major junior team that go play college. Well, they're taking someone's spot from somewhere,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, I think it's just the black and white of it, right? I mean, a 19-year-old playing the BCJ trying to get a scholarship is usually there because he wasn't good enough in the beginning, right, to get to the WHL or the OHL. Not saying that they can't improve or go, but I'm just saying across the board, right? So now you're giving a scholarship to somebody in the BC Junior League at 19, because you don't have access to the 19-year-old in the WHL. Yeah, it's just not that player in the WHL. I would say 7 times out of 10 is probably better, maybe even more than that. You know, I'm trying to be gracious, right? So like, there is going to be, I think, more scholarships taken away from those leagues you're talking about. I would suspect. It just makes sense to me, which also then I think makes college potentially get a little bit older. I think it maybe makes all the leagues a bit older. Like, I think that maybe the WHL gets older because now they have the ability to go to the BCJ where they couldn't before. And now they can have a 19-year-old there. It's a hell of a good hockey player and probably better than 17-year-old they would have or the 18-year-old they would have, right? So why not make camp competitive and see what that league's like? So now they have access to more players too. I think maybe the BCJ gets a little bit younger. It's more of a development league for the WHL. Yeah, it's going to be interesting, though. It really is going to be interesting. Who knows what it's gonna be? But I just love the fact that for someone like me, looking back at, like, I would have loved to have had at least the option, right? I'm not saying I would have. I signed early and played pro early, but it would still have been great not to have to make this ultimate decision at 15 years old about which path I was taking. Never made sense, right?
Every pro player that I played with that played junior, whenever they've been to a college game or they see college, they're like, why didn't I do this? This would have been unbelievable. Play on the weekends and be a student, and like, this would be unbelievable. Yeah. So, you know, I grew up in Toronto, so I wanted to play in the OHL because you see the global game of the week, the Longine Whitnauer player of the game on Saturdays on Global. You're like, oh, that looks so cool. I want to do that. I wasn't good enough. And so I had to go to college. I wasn't, you know, I got drafted, but I said I was going to school. Yeah. You know, I think it'll be interesting. You're right. I think it becomes an older league, or maybe it goes the other way. Let's say you're London and you say, I'm philosophically only going to have a team of 16 and 17-year-olds. And maybe I create such a great example or like system for them that they want to stay. And so then, you know, that's what you're building off, because it's hard to develop if you just grab kids when they're 18, 19. Like, yeah, that's going to makes it harder.
I think the draft is still going to be super relevant, but I think like just like those top guys will get fed in, but I think there'll be less room for some of the other ones. You know what I mean? Like, there's going to be another place to go, right? Like, I think there's always going to be a desire to develop your top product, just like in the NHL, right? You know what I mean? Like, the top guys will be there, right? And then the other guys go to the WHL and they or the AHL and they scrap it out. But it is it's definitely interesting. I mean, there's already been announcements, right, from the WHL. I know I'm more tied here to the West of like guys going to college next year and moving on. And yeah, it's going to be, I'm interested to see what happens to the AJHL, the BCHL, you know, what that looks like as far as who they bring in and what camp looks like next year from the WHL level. Like, are there any BCHL guys coming? It's going to be interesting. Now, a lot of the guys from Ontario, here's a guy from West Kelowna, Pridham, I think is his last name. He was a Chicago Blackhawks draft 3rd rounder. He was here in West Kelowna. He left like days after the announcement. He's playing for Kitchener in the OHL now. Like, and he's not the only one. Vernon Vipers here. They lost 2 guys to the WHL. Boom. Like, really? They left. So like, the BCJ is already losing players, you know, in some capacity because these different routes have been open. So I think we're just starting to see the dominoes fall about what's going to happen.
That makes sense. I never even thought about it happening that way, but that makes a ton of sense, because they would have went to junior, but they're like, no, I want to keep my eligibility. Now they're like, no, I can go.
Yeah, like it makes the CHL better, I think. Like the top guys, right? And there's not that many top guys like that actually stay. You know, like who would be the most recent one there? Oh, like the Nadeau brothers, right? So a 1st rounder to the NHL draft from the BCJ. I mean, it happens every once in a while, but not very often. Usually those best guys are already playing junior somewhere else, like, you know, major junior. But those guys don't have to stay there now, right? So those top guys will go to CHL most likely. Why wouldn't you? It's a better league, right? Better better towns, better venues, better everything, right? Exposure. So I think, yeah, like that whole thing is going to be interesting. I don't know, whatever. Like, I have a bunch of parents ask me, so I wanted your opinion from what it looks like for you guys out there. And I do agree with that USHL scenario, because there's no reason why that would change at all. All the US players would still go there. You mean, like, I shouldn't say all. Some maybe want to play a longer season potentially, and maybe they'll hop the border because they can. But I think for the most part, that league will be intact, and nothing much will change with it. It's going to be the subsidiary leagues that maybe see an input. But anyways, we're over time. Loved chatting with you, boy. We barely even got into your stuff, but that's the way hockey goes, especially when there's so many aspects to cover. But I really appreciate you coming on today, Jamal, and sharing your story and your coaching story here today.
Yeah. So happy for you and excited for all the stuff you're doing, and best of luck with everything.
Thanks,
Great
man.
to see you doing well.
Thank you for being a listener of the Up My Hockey podcast and for listening to that entire conversation with Jamal Mayers. I know I enjoyed it. It is a little shorter than what you're used to here if you're a longtime listener at the Up My Hockey podcast, 40 minutes, but that was what Jamal's schedule could allow, and I sure enjoyed the time we did have to shoot the breeze about youth hockey. During that conversation, you probably remember a part where we were talking about deliberate practice. Obviously, conversations are completely unscripted, and Jamal brought up the idea of 10 to 15 minutes a day for younger players to go out maybe twice a day to work on their game and to really compound their skill development. And I was able to talk a little bit about the Peak Potential program and how that's a main piece of week 2. So I just wanted to double back on that and just talk to you parents and players out there that maybe feel that they aren't investing as much as they can outside of their practice time. That is a common concern that I have through the mindset quiz that is offered on my website, that players, regardless of age, like junior players all the way down to U13 players, feel a type of guilt sometimes that they aren't doing enough away from the rink, that they feel that there is more that they could do. They're not motivated enough. Maybe they don't have the intention of what to do or the consistency and accountability to do it. Which is why, because it's such a common theme, even across high-level players, that I created week 2 of the Peak Potential process. It talks about the 4 stages of learning. It talks about the process required to get better. It breaks down the stages of it, gives you a strength and weakness builder, and talks about deliberate practice and the 20-minute monster, which I referred to. Week 2 of the Peak Potential process is essentially worth the entire price of the program, because the players that do use the information involved in it there is, like, we're talking about maximizing development for a long time. The longer the runway, the longer you understand how development works, the longer you can apply deliberate practice to your own growth, the gains are absolutely exponential. And parents, that's one of the biggest responses from parents, is seeing the new dedication and accountability that the players have. And they don't have to be involved in the idea of, hey, did you do this? Hey, shouldn't you do that? Why haven't you done this? Players take accountability. They have their 2-week planner set up on an ongoing basis. They know what they're going to do. They know when they're going to do it, and they're excited to do it because they've been taught the reasons of how it's going to help them, and they see the results that they're getting, that they are getting better. So if that speaks to you, you might be somebody that wants to get your player involved in the Peak Potential program. It's an ongoing rotation as far as the guided mission is concerned. That's when the players get to work with me on coaching calls at the end of each week. So you can check my website for when the next one is being offered. Right now, if you are listening to this live, the next one is going to be launched November 25th. We are going to start officially with lessons that day on the Monday. So it might be good timing for you right before Christmas to get some new insight, new tools, new perspectives into the brains of your players so they can utilize them for the second half of the season. If that timing works out great for you, check out the mindset quiz at upmyhockey.com. That's all I got for you today. Hope you enjoyed Jamal. Jamal, thank you for being on. Really appreciate you and what you're doing. And until next time, this is Jason Padolin. Play hard and keep your head up.